The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their harsh glare across the sterile hospital room. Jordan Matthews pressed the phone harder against his ear, willing his sister's voice to carry some warmth, some hint of the concern he desperately needed to hear. "Jordan, we've talked about this already." Lisa's voice crackled through the speaker, each word carefully measured. "The Bahamas trip has been planned for months. We can't just cancel everything now." His throat felt raw from the medications, but Jordan pushed through the discomfort. "I'm not asking you to cancel, Lisa. I'm asking you to be here. The surgery is risky and What exactly are we supposed to do?" His brother Marcus's voice cut through from the background, closer to the phone now. "Hold your hand? The doctors will handle everything. That's what they're paid for." Jordan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 3 years of accumulated mistakes pressing down on his chest. The hospital bed felt like a prison, the monitors beside him beeping out the rhythm of his isolation. "I've always been there for all of you. When Dad needed that loan for the house, when you wanted to go to Europe for your anniversary, when Marcus needed—" "That was different," Lisa interrupted, her tone sharpening. "You were doing well then. You had the business. You had money coming in. Things changed, Jordan." The casual cruelty of it hit him like a physical blow. "Things change," he repeated slowly. "So your love changes with my bank account?" "Don't be dramatic," Marcus said, his voice now clearly addressing the phone directly. "Look, we've been planning this vacation for a year. We've already paid for everything, the resort, the flights, the excursions. We can't just throw away thousands of dollars. I'm facing a surgery that could save my life or—" Jordan's voice cracked. "And you're worried about losing money on a vacation?" A pause. Then Lisa's voice, colder than he'd ever heard it. "Jordan, be realistic. What difference would it make if we sat around that depressing hospital room? You'll either make it through the surgery or you won't. Us being there doesn't change the outcome." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jordan stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in each square, anything to keep from processing what he'd just heard. "Besides," Marcus added, and Jordan could hear the shrug in his voice, "our vacation is more important than sitting around watching you sleep off anesthesia. You always figure things out, Jordan." The line went dead. Jordan let the phone slip from his numb fingers, the device clattering onto the thin hospital blanket. The silence that followed was complete, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor that seemed to mock him with each electronic pulse. You always figure things out. The irony was suffocating. For 35 years he had figured things out. He'd built an empire from nothing, provided for everyone around him, been the reliable one, the successful one, the one everyone turned to when they needed something. And now, when he needed them, truly needed them, they were choosing a beach vacation over his life. He thought about the stack of medical bills on his nightstand at home, each one a reminder of how far he'd fallen. The insurance company had been clear. Experimental treatments weren't covered. The surgery that might save his life would cost more than he had, more than he could borrow, more than he could scrape together from the remnants of his failed business. But his family had money now, money he'd given them over the years, money he'd used to pay off their mortgages, fund their vacations, buy their cars, secure their comfort. Money that apparently came with an expiration date on their gratitude. The nurse knocked softly and entered, her kind eyes taking in his stricken expression. "Everything okay, honey?" Jordan managed a weak smile. "Just family being family." She nodded with the understanding of someone who'd seen too many patients abandoned when things got difficult. "The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp. Is there anyone we should call to be here with you?" The question hung in the air. Anyone. Such a simple word that felt impossibly complicated. "No," he whispered. "There's no one." 3 years earlier, the conference room on the 42nd floor offered a spectacular view of the city skyline, but Jordan Matthews barely noticed it. His attention was entirely focused on the woman across the mahogany table, her dark hair catching the afternoon light as she leaned forward to make her point. "The Southeast Asian market is undervalued," Sarah Jones was saying, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd done her homework. "Everyone's looking at China, but Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, that's where the real opportunities are hiding." Jordan found himself nodding, not just at her business acumen, but at the way she commanded the room. Half the executives at this conference were twice her age, but when Sarah spoke, they listened. "Interesting perspective," he said when she finished her presentation. "I've been thinking along similar lines for my import business." She smiled, and something in his chest tightened. "Jordan Matthews, right?" "I've heard about your work. Very impressive growth in just 5 years." 7, he corrected, then immediately felt foolish for the clarification. "Even more impressive then, starting from nothing and building what you have. That takes real vision." They talked through the coffee break, then through lunch, then found themselves in the hotel bar long after the conference had officially ended. Sarah was different from anyone he'd ever met. She didn't seem impressed by his success in the way others were. She was interested in how he thought, how he approached problems, what drove him to keep pushing when things got difficult. 6 months later, Jordan proposed on the same rooftop restaurant where they'd had their first official date. Sarah said yes with tears in her eyes, and Jordan felt like the luckiest man alive. The wedding was everything they'd dreamed of: elegant, intimate, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Jordan's family filled half the church, his parents beaming with pride, Lisa and Marcus serving as maid of honor and best man respectively, aunts and uncles and cousins all celebrating the golden boy's perfect life. Sarah's side was smaller. A few close friends from college, some business associates, her elderly aunt who'd flown in from Seattle. But she glowed with happiness, and that was all Jordan cared about. Jordan looked across the room at his new wife, radiant in her wedding dress, and felt his heart swell with pure contentment. "I want to give her everything," he said. "I'm sure you will," his mother replied. But even then there was something in her tone, a coolness that Jordan was too happy to notice. The changes started small. Jordan began spending more evenings at home with Sarah instead of at family dinners. He'd always been the one to organize gatherings, to make the reservations, to pick up the check. Now those responsibilities started falling to others, and the invitations became less frequent. "We missed you at Sunday dinner," Lisa mentioned during one of their weekly phone calls. "Sorry, Sarah and I were working on some business proposals. You know how it is." "Actually, I don't," Lisa said, her voice carrying a new edge. "Must be nice to have a wife who works in business too." "Very convenient." Jordan frowned at the phone. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just that it's interesting how much time you two spend working together." He let it slide, but the comment stuck with him. It was the first of many small cuts, little remarks that seemed designed to make him question his marriage, his priorities, his choices. Meanwhile, Sarah was quietly revolutionizing his business. She had connections in markets he'd never considered, strategies for expansion he'd never imagined. Within 6 months of their marriage, Jordan's import company had doubled its revenue. "How did you know about the Malaysian supplier?" he asked one evening as they reviewed contracts at their dining room table. Sarah looked up from her laptop. "My college roommate is from Kuala Lumpur. She introduced me to her family's business network." "Why didn't you mention this before?" She shrugged. "You were doing fine on your own. I didn't want to interfere. But when you mentioned wanting to expand into textiles, I thought it might help." It did help. It helped tremendously. Sarah's connections, her market knowledge, her business instincts, they transformed Jordan's modest success into genuine wealth. But as his bank account grew, so did his family's resentment. "She certainly has expensive taste," his mother observed during Christmas dinner, eyeing the diamond earrings Jordan had given Sarah. "I bought those for her, Mom." "Of course you did, dear. It's just interesting how quickly she's gotten used to the finer things." Jordan felt Sarah stiffen beside him, but she said nothing. She rarely said anything when his family made these comments. She just absorbed them, filing them away somewhere inside herself where Jordan couldn't see the damage accumulating. "The house is beautiful," Aunt Carol said, touring their new home, a sprawling modern place in the hills that Sarah had found and Jordan had fallen in love with. Very contemporary. "Sarah has great taste," Jordan said proudly. "I'm sure she does," Carol replied. "Must have taken a lot of convincing to get you to spend this much." "Actually, she tried to talk me out of it. Said it was too expensive." "Did she really?" Carol's eyebrows rose. How surprising. These conversations always left Jordan feeling unsettled, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. His family was being polite, technically. They were being included, welcomed, treated with respect. But there was something underneath, some current of disapproval that grew stronger with each passing month. The breaking point came 18 months after the wedding, at Marcus's birthday party. Jordan and Sarah arrived fashionably late, having been delayed by a conference call with potential investors in Singapore. Sarah's contacts again, another opportunity she'd created for them. "Look who decided to show up," Marcus called out as they entered the backyard where the party was in full swing. "Sorry we're late," Jordan said, embracing his brother. "Business call ran long." "Must have been important," Lisa said, appearing at Marcus's shoulder. "More important than family time." "It was about the Singapore expansion," Sarah said quietly. "The time difference made scheduling difficult." "Ah, yes, the Singapore expansion," Lisa repeated. "Another one of Sarah's ideas, I'm sure." The way she said Sarah's name, like it tasted bitter in her mouth, made Jordan's jaw tighten. "Sarah's been instrumental in growing the business. We're lucky to have her insights." "Lucky?" Lisa nodded. "That's one way to put it." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sarah asked, her voice still calm but with steel underneath. "Nothing," Lisa said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just that it's convenient how all these opportunities started appearing after you two got married. Almost like you were waiting for the right moment to share them." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Jordan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Lisa," he said sharply, "that's enough." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," she continued, emboldened by the attention. "It's interesting timing, that's all. Jordan struggles for years to build his business, then suddenly after the wedding, boom. International connections, huge contracts, all this success. Makes you wonder what else she might have been holding back." "You're suggesting I deliberately withheld business opportunities?" Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm not suggesting anything," Lisa said. "I'm just observing patterns." Jordan looked around the party and realized the conversations had stopped. Everyone was watching this exchange, waiting to see how it would play out. His parents, his aunts and uncles, his cousins, all of them watching with the careful attention of people who'd been discussing this topic long before tonight. Sarah stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the concrete. "I think we should go." "Sarah, wait," Jordan started. "No," she said, her composure finally cracking. "I've listened to these insinuations for months. I've ignored the comments about my background, my motivations, my contributions to your business. But I won't stand here and listen to your family suggest I married you for money." "Nobody said that," Lisa protested. "You didn't have to say it," Sarah shot back. "It's been implied in every conversation, every gathering, every time I've tried to be part of this family. I've given Jordan everything I have, my connections, my expertise, my trust fund for startup capital, my career opportunities that I passed up to help build his business instead. And all I've gotten in return is suspicion and accusations." The silence that followed was deafening. Jordan felt like he was watching a car accident in slow motion, unable to move or speak or do anything to stop the destruction unfolding in front of him. "Your trust fund?" he managed to whisper. Sarah turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "The initial capital for the textile expansion. You thought it came from the business loan, but the bank only approved half of what we needed. I made up the difference. You never told me that. You never asked where the extra money came from. You were so excited about the opportunity, I didn't want to complicate things. Jordan felt the ground shifting beneath him. What else haven't you told me? The question came out harsher than he'd intended, and he saw Sarah flinch as if he'd struck her. That's not fair, she said quietly. Isn't it? Lisa jumped in. Seems like a pretty reasonable question. What else has she been hiding, Jordan? I haven't been hiding anything, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I've been protecting him, protecting us. Because I knew if his family knew how much I'd contributed, they'd find a way to use it against me. Against us. Protecting him from what? Marcus demanded. From knowing his wife is trying to control his business? Jordan looked around at his family. Sarah, he said softly. Don't, she whispered. Just don't. I can see it in your face. You're wondering if they're right. You're wondering if I've been manipulating you, using you, playing some long game that you were too naive to see. I'm not. Yes, you are, she said with devastating certainty. And that tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage really means to you. She walked away then, leaving Jordan standing in his brother's backyard surrounded by his family, feeling more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. She's good, Lisa said quietly. I'll give her that. Playing the victim, making it seem like she's the one being wronged. Jordan turned to his sister, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. She is the one being wronged. Jordan, his mother said gently, honey, I know you love her, but you have to see how this looks. All these secrets, all these hidden contributions, it's manipulative behavior. The drive home was silent. Sarah stared out the window while Jordan gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing. When they reached their house, the house Sarah had found, that she'd tried to talk him out of buying, she went straight upstairs. Jordan found her in their bedroom. Sarah, we need to talk about this. About what? About how your family has spent the last year and a half trying to convince you I'm a gold digger. About how you've started to believe them. About how you just stood there tonight and let them tear me apart. I defended you. You defended me. Like you were doing me a favor, she said, finally facing him. Not like you were defending your wife. Not like you believed in me. Jordan sat heavily on the edge of the bed. I don't know what to believe anymore. That's the problem, Sarah said quietly. After everything we've built together, everything we've shared, everything I've sacrificed for this marriage, you still don't know what to believe about me. You kept things from me. Important things. I kept things from them, she corrected. I shared everything with you except the specific sources of funding and connections, because I knew your family would use that information to hurt us. Without me, Sarah said quietly, the business will collapse. Not because I'm trying to hurt you, but because I am the business now. The connections, the contracts, the relationships with suppliers and clients, they're all built on my reputation and my relationships. I'm not threatening you, Jordan. I'm warning you because I love you. Maybe that's exactly what someone cunning would say. The words were out before Jordan could stop them, and he watched Sarah's face crumble as if he'd physically struck her. There it is, she whispered. There's what you really think of me. The morning after Sarah left, Jordan woke to an empty house that felt like a tomb. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Hope you're feeling better today. Family dinner Sunday? We missed you. For the first time in 18 months, Jordan had somewhere to go, someone who wanted his company. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt hollow. The family dinner was a celebration disguised as concern. His mother fussed over him, piling his plate high with his favorite foods. Marcus clapped him on the back and cracked jokes about bachelor life. Lisa kept shooting him sympathetic looks and making subtle digs about manipulative women and lucky escapes. You look tired, honey, his mother said, studying his face with the intensity of a doctor examining symptoms. Are you sleeping? I'm fine, Mom. Of course you are, she said, patting his hand. You're resilient. You always bounce back from these things. these things, as if his marriage had been nothing more than a minor setback, a phase he'd outgrown. "I'm just glad you saw through her act before it was too late," Lisa said, raising her wineglass. "To Jordan's freedom." The toast felt like a funeral dirge. Jordan lifted his glass mechanically, the wine tasting like ash in his mouth. "So what's the plan now?" Marcus asked. "Back to the bachelor pad lifestyle? Maybe we can find you someone more suitable." "I don't want to talk about dating." "Of course not, too soon. But when you're ready, we know some lovely women. Actually, Carol's daughter just got divorced." "Marcus." Jordan's voice carried a warning that made his brother pause mid-sentence. Sorry, just thinking ahead. You know we only want what's best for you." The sentence echoed in Jordan's mind as he drove home later that evening. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the house. It was a beautiful house, exactly what he'd dreamed of when he was starting out. Inside, he poured himself a scotch and sat in his home office, looking at the business files spread across his desk. The phone rang. It was David Higgins, Sarah's contact at the textile company. "Jordan, my friend, I'm calling about tomorrow's meeting. Sarah mentioned you might want to adjust the terms of our agreement." Jordan frowned. "I'm sorry, what?" "The email she sent last week, about restructuring the partnership arrangement. I was surprised, but if that's what works best for your business." "I didn't get any email. What did she say exactly?" A pause. "Perhaps there's been a miscommunication. Sarah indicated that you would be handling all international partnerships directly now, without her involvement. She asked me to work with you on transitioning the relationships." The implication hit Jordan like a physical blow. Sarah hadn't just left him. She'd quietly begun extracting herself from the business relationships that were keeping his company afloat. "David, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we reschedule the meeting? I need to sort some things out." "Of course, but Jordan, Sarah is a good woman. Whatever happened between you two, don't let pride destroy what you've built." The line went dead, leaving Jordan staring at the phone. He immediately opened his laptop and began searching through his emails, looking for communications he might have missed. What he found made his blood run cold. Email after email, all forwarded from Sarah's business account. Clients asking about contract renewals, suppliers requesting confirmation of orders, international partners wanting to know about the status of ongoing negotiations. All of them had been handled by Sarah, smoothly and professionally, but with a subtle shift in tone that suggested she was transitioning out of active involvement. Jordan grabbed his phone and dialed Sarah's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Sarah, it's me. We need to talk. Call me back." She didn't. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in watching a business empire crumble in slow motion. Jordan found himself working 18-hour days, trying to do the job of 2 people. "You look terrible," Marcus observed when Jordan missed yet another family dinner. "When's the last time you slept?" "I'm fine," Jordan lied, though his reflection in the mirror told a different story. Dark circles under his eyes, a face that seemed to have aged 5 years in 5 weeks. "Maybe you should call her," Lisa suggested, though her tone suggested she hoped he wouldn't. "For business reasons, just to smooth things over." Jordan had been thinking the same thing, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. "I don't need her help." "Of course you don't," Lisa agreed quickly. "You built this business. You can rebuild it." But rebuilding required capital, and capital was hemorrhaging from the business faster than Jordan could replace it. The first real sign of trouble came when his accountant called with the quarterly numbers. Jordan stared at the numbers on his computer screen until they blurred together. 60%. More than half of his business, gone. Sarah's warning echoed in his mind. Without me, the business will collapse. She hadn't been threatening him. She'd been telling him the truth. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Haven't seen you in weeks. Are you eating enough?" Jordan almost laughed. Eating enough. As if his problems could be solved with a home-cooked meal and motherly concern. As if the solution to his collapsing business was more family dinners, and less focus on the work that was supposed to be supporting them all. He typed back, "Busy with work. Will call soon." But he didn't call. He couldn't face their questions, their sympathy, their barely concealed satisfaction at being proven right about Sarah. Because the truth was becoming clearer every day. They hadn't been right about her at all. They'd been catastrophically wrong. The pain started as a dull ache in his chest, easily dismissed as stress. Jordan had been working 100-hour weeks, living on coffee and takeout, sleeping 3 hours a night when he slept at all. Physical discomfort seemed like a natural consequence of his circumstances, but the ache persisted, spreading to his shoulders, his arms, his jaw. He found himself short of breath after climbing stairs, dizzy when he stood up too quickly. The rational part of his mind knew he should see a doctor, but the desperate part of his mind, the part that was watching his life's work crumble, couldn't spare the time. That night, Jordan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his chest tight with what he told himself was anxiety. His phone rang. For a moment, his heart leaped. Maybe it was Sarah, ready to talk, ready to work things out. But the caller ID showed Marcus's name. "Hey, brother. How's the Empire?" "It's fine," Jordan lied automatically. Good. Listen, I've got a favor to ask. You know that business loan I mentioned? The one for the new restaurant concept?" Jordan's stomach dropped. "Marcus, this isn't a good time." "Come on, it's not that much. 50,000. I've got investors lined up, but I need some seed money to get things rolling. You know I'm good for it." "I said it's not a good time." "Jordan, what's going on? You sound weird." Jordan almost told him, almost explained about the failing business, the mounting debts, the fear that kept him awake at night. Almost confessed that he didn't have $50,000 to lend, that he barely had $50,000 left. Period. But admitting that would mean admitting that Sarah had been right. It would mean acknowledging that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life when he chose his family's approval over his wife's love. "I'm just tired," he said instead. "Okay, but think about the loan, all right?" "I've got a good feeling about this venture." Jordan hung up and immediately called his accountant. "How much cash do we have available right now?" "Available? Like liquid funds?" "Yes." A pause. "Jordan, you're not thinking of making any major investments right now, are you? Because—" "Just tell me the number." 12,000, maybe 15 if we push some payments." Jordan closed his eyes. A year ago, he'd had over $2 million in liquid assets. Now he had enough to cover payroll for 1 month if he was lucky. The chest pain flared again, sharp enough to make him gasp. He fumbled for his phone and dialed his doctor's office. The diagnosis was delivered with the clinical detachment of a doctor who'd seen too many overworked executives learn the hard way that money couldn't buy health. "You have a significant blockage in your left anterior descending artery," Dr. Patel said, pointing to the cardiac catheterization images on his computer screen. "It's what we call a widowmaker. If this closes completely, you'll have a massive heart attack." Jordan stared at the screen, seeing his own mortality displayed in stark black and white. "What are my options?" "Surgery. A triple bypass would be the most effective approach, but it's expensive and carries significant risks. There's also angioplasty, which is less invasive but might not be as durable given the extent of the blockage." "How expensive?" Dr. Patel consulted his notes. "The bypass surgery would run approximately $300,000. Your insurance will cover about 40% of that." Jordan felt the room spin. $300,000. He didn't have $300,000. He barely had $3,000. "What happens if I don't have the surgery?" "Mr. Matthews, this isn't optional. Without intervention, you're looking at a massive coronary event within the next 6 months, probably sooner given your stress levels." "But if I can't afford it?" "There are payment plans, medical financing options. The hospital has a financial assistance program." Jordan nodded numbly, but his mind was already racing. Payment plans required income. Medical financing required credit. Financial assistance required admitting he was broke. He sat in his car in the parking lot, and did something he hadn't done in years. He cried. Not the frustrated tears of a difficult business deal, but the deep, wrenching sobs of a man who'd lost everything and was about to lose the only thing that really mattered: his life. When the tears finally stopped, he wiped his eyes and pulled out his phone. He had calls to make, pride to swallow, help to ask for. The first call was to his parents. "Oh, honey," his mother said when he explained the situation. "That's terrible. Of course we'll help however we can." "I need to borrow money for the surgery, Mom. About 160,000. Silence. Then his father's voice, having taken the phone. "Son, that's a lot of money." "I know, but I'll pay it back with interest, as soon as the business recovers." "The business isn't recovering though, is it?" his father said gently. "Marcus told us things have been tough." Jordan closed his eyes. Of course Marcus had told them. His family had always been a unit, sharing information, making decisions collectively. He'd forgotten that reality in his desperation. "We can help," his father continued, "but not with that kind of money. We've got maybe 20,000 in savings. The rest is tied up in retirement accounts and the house." "What about a home equity loan?" "Jordan, we're 70 years old. We can't take on that kind of debt." $20,000. It was generous, more than he'd expected, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't even close to enough. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for offering what you can." "Call Lisa and Marcus," his mother said, back on the line. "Maybe if we all pitch in." The second call was to Lisa. "Jordan, I'm so sorry. Of course I want to help. But with the kids' college funds and the new house, I can maybe do 10,000. 15 if I cash out some stocks." The third call was to Marcus. "Jesus, man. I'm sorry. I wish I could help, but I just put everything into the restaurant concept. Maybe I could ask my investors." "Don't worry about it," Jordan cut him off. "I'll figure something out." But he was starting to realize that figuring it out might not be possible. His family was willing to help, but their combined contributions would cover maybe a quarter of what he needed. He could try to get a loan, but banks didn't lend money to failing businesses. He could try to sell assets, but most of his assets were tied up in the business that was hemorrhaging money. The chest pain flared again, reminding him that time was running out. In 2 weeks, he would need to be in surgery. In 2 weeks, he would either find a way to save his life, or he would die knowing that he'd destroyed everything that mattered to him. Jordan looked around his empty house and wondered if this was what dying alone felt like. Not the physical act of death, but the slow realization that when everything fell apart, there was no one left who truly cared whether he lived or died. The hospital billing office smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Jordan sat across from Mrs. Patterson, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd probably delivered devastating financial news to hundreds of patients over the years. "Mr. Matthews, I've reviewed your application for financial assistance," she said, her voice professionally sympathetic. "Unfortunately, your business assets put you over the threshold for our hardship program." "But the business is failing," Jordan said, hearing the desperation in his own voice. "Those assets aren't liquid. I can't access that money." "I understand, but our guidelines are very specific. You'd need to liquidate those assets or file for bankruptcy to qualify." Jordan walked out of the billing office and found himself in the hospital cafeteria, sitting at a plastic table surrounded by the quiet conversations of families dealing with their own crises. He pulled out his phone and stared at Sarah's number, his thumb hovering over the call button. "Excuse me, are you Jordan Matthews?" Jordan looked up to see a woman in scrubs approaching his table. She was young, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and the slightly harried look of someone in the middle of a long shift. "Yes?" "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the cardiac residents. I wanted to talk to you about your case." Jordan's heart sank. More bad news, probably. Additional complications that would make his situation even more impossible. "Your surgery has been moved up," Dr. Kim said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. "Moved up?" Why? Your condition is deteriorating faster than we initially thought. Dr. Patel reviewed your latest tests and decided we can't wait any longer. Jordan felt the room spin slightly. But the payment arrangements, I haven't finished working out the financing. That's been taken care of. What do you mean taken care of? Dr. Kim consulted her tablet. According to billing, your account has been paid in full. Surgery, recovery, post-operative care, everything. Jordan stared at her, unable to process what he was hearing. That's impossible. I don't have that kind of money. Someone does. The payment came through this morning. Cashier's check. Full amount. Who? Who paid it? Dr. Kim checked her notes again. I'm not supposed to discuss patient financial information, but since you're asking about your own account... She lowered her voice. The payment came from Sarah Jones. I assume that's someone you know. The cafeteria around Jordan seemed to fade away, the conversations and clatter of dishes becoming distant background noise. Sarah. After everything he'd done to her, everything he'd said, the way he'd chosen his family over her and thrown her love back in her face, she'd saved his life. Mr. Matthews, are you all right? Jordan realized he was crying, not the quiet tears of earlier weeks, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere he'd forgotten existed. She paid for it, he managed to say between gasps. She actually paid for it. Dr. Kim handed him a box of tissues from the nearby napkin dispenser. She must care about you very much. Jordan nodded, unable to speak. Sarah cared about him. Despite everything, despite the divorce and the accusations and the months of silence, she cared enough to save his life. The surgery is scheduled for 7 tomorrow morning, Dr. Kim repeated gently. You'll need to check in by 5 a.m. for prep. Do you have someone who can drive you? Jordan wiped his eyes with the tissue. I'll manage. What about after the surgery? You'll need someone to help with recovery, at least for the first few days. I'll figure something out. Jordan drove home in a daze, his mind reeling from the day's revelations. Sarah had saved his life without asking for anything in return, without even telling him she was doing it. She'd simply seen that he was in trouble and acted the way she'd always acted throughout their marriage, quietly, efficiently, putting his needs ahead of her own. He pulled into his driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, looking at the house that had once represented everything he'd dreamed of achieving. Now it just looked empty, a monument to misplaced priorities and wasted opportunities. Jordan went inside and tried to prepare for what might be his last night in his own home. He'd packed a bag for the hospital stay, arranged for someone to water the plants, set up automatic payments for his bills, all the practical details of a life temporarily put on hold. The surgery went perfectly. Jordan woke up in the recovery room feeling like he'd been hit by a truck, but Dr. Patel's satisfied expression told him everything he needed to know. Textbook procedure, the surgeon said, reviewing Jordan's charts. The bypasses are working beautifully. You should make a full recovery. Jordan tried to speak, but his throat was raw from the breathing tube. A nurse offered him ice chips, and gradually his voice returned. How long was I out? About 6 hours. The surgery took a bit longer than expected, but everything went smoothly. Jordan looked around the recovery room, noting the machines monitoring his vital signs, the IV drip feeding medications into his system, the overwhelming sense of being cared for by competent professionals. Is there anyone here? Family? Oh, yes, the nurse said with a smile. Your wife has been here all day. She's in the waiting room. Should I get her? Your wife? The nurse had naturally assumed Sarah was still his wife, and neither of them had corrected her. Jordan wondered what that meant, if it meant anything at all. Yes, please. A few minutes later, Sarah appeared in the doorway. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair slightly dishevelled, her clothes rumpled as if she'd been sleeping in a hospital chair. Hey, she said softly, approaching his bed. Hey, yourself. Jordan's voice was barely above a whisper, but she heard him. How do you feel? Like someone cracked my chest open with a crowbar. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. That's basically what they did. She pulled a chair close to his bed and sat down, close enough that he could see the relief in her eyes, the way her shoulders relaxed now that she could see for herself that he was okay. "Thank you," he said, "for everything, for saving my life." "You would have done the same for me." "Would I?" Jordan asked honestly. "A few months ago, if you'd been in trouble and needed help, would I have been there for you? Or would I have let my family convince me that helping you was somehow wrong?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to think you would have done the right thing. But you're not sure?" "No," she admitted. "I'm not sure." The honesty stung, but Jordan appreciated it. Sarah had always been honest with him, even when the truth was uncomfortable. It was one of the things he'd loved about her, and one of the things his family had taught him to distrust. "I want to be sure," he said. "I want to be the kind of person who would have saved you the way you saved me." "Jordan, I know I don't have the right to ask for another chance. I know I destroyed our marriage and broke your trust and chose other people's opinions over your love. But I want to try to be better. I want to try to deserve what you did for me." Before Sarah could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway outside, loud voices, someone arguing with the nursing staff. "That's my brother in there. We have a right to see him." "Marcus." Jordan recognized his voice, along with Lisa's higher-pitched protests and his mother's attempts to mediate. Sarah stiffened. "Your family's here. They've been here all day, actually, waiting for you to wake up." "Have they been giving you trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle." But Jordan could see the tension in her posture, the way she'd instinctively pulled back when she heard their voices. Even now, even after everything she'd done for him, his family made her feel unwelcome. The door burst open and Marcus strode in, followed by Lisa, their parents, and Aunt Carol. They surrounded Jordan's bed with the kind of overwhelming concern that left no room for anyone else. "Thank God you're okay," his mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We were so worried." "The surgery took forever," Lisa added. "We didn't know what was happening." Marcus clapped him carefully on the shoulder. "You scared us, man. Don't ever do that again." It was several minutes before anyone acknowledged Sarah's presence in the room. When they finally did, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Sarah," his mother said with icy politeness, "how nice of you to visit." "She's been here all day," Jordan said, his voice stronger now. "She paid for the surgery." The revelation stopped all conversation. Jordan's family looked at Sarah with a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and grudging recognition. "Paid for it?" Lisa asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean she covered the full cost, $300,000, when I couldn't afford it and insurance wouldn't cover it. Sarah stepped in and saved my life." The silence that followed was deafening. Jordan could see his family processing this information, trying to reconcile it with their image of Sarah as a manipulative gold digger. "That's very generous," his father said finally. "Generous?" Jordan's voice carried an edge that made everyone in the room look at him. "She saved my life. While you all were planning your vacations and calculating how much you could afford to lend me, Sarah quietly paid for everything without asking for anything in return." "Jordan," Marcus said uncomfortably, "we offered to help." "You offered what you could spare," Jordan interrupted. "What you could afford to lose. Sarah gave everything." "We don't know her financial situation," Lisa said defensively. "Maybe $300,000 isn't that much to her." Jordan looked at Sarah, seeing the way she'd gone very still, very careful. He'd seen that expression before. It was how she looked when she was being attacked but didn't want to fight back. "Tell them," he said gently. "Jordan, it's not necessary." "Tell them where the money came from." Sarah sighed, clearly reluctant to reveal the depth of her sacrifice. "I sold my condo and cashed out my retirement accounts." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah had given up her home, her financial security, her future, to save the life of a man who'd divorced her and called her manipulative. "Why would you do that?" Aunt Carol asked, clearly baffled. "Because I love him," Sarah said simply, because when someone you love is dying and you have the power to save them, you don't calculate the cost. You just act. Jordan felt tears streaming down his face. He reached for Sarah's hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she let him take it. I called her manipulative, he said to his family, his voice breaking. I accused her of marrying me for money, of hiding her contributions to make herself indispensable. And when I was dying and broke and desperate, she sold everything she had to save my life. His family stood around the hospital bed in uncomfortable silence, the magnitude of Sarah's sacrifice making their own contributions seem small and conditional by comparison. That's very nice, Lisa said finally, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. But Jordan, we need to talk about your recovery. You can't go back to that big house alone. You need family around you while you heal. He won't be alone, Sarah said quietly. What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean, I'll be taking care of him during his recovery. That's not necessary, Jordan's mother said quickly. We can take care of our own family. Like you took care of him when he needed surgery money? Sarah's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Like you took care of him when his business was failing and he was working himself to death. That's not fair, Lisa protested. We didn't know how bad things were. You didn't want to know, Sarah replied. You wanted to believe that Jordan would always be your safety net, your reliable provider, your golden boy who could solve everyone's problems. You never bothered to ask if he needed help until it was almost too late. Jordan squeezed Sarah's hand, amazed by her quiet strength, her willingness to defend him even after everything he'd put her through. Sarah, he said softly, you don't have to fight my battles for me anymore. She looked at him, surprised. You're right. I don't. Jordan turned to face his family, his voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence like a blade. Where were you, he said, his words sharp and unforgiving. When I was drowning in pain, when my business was collapsing, when I was literally dying, where were you? Jordan, his mother started. We offered $20,000, he interrupted, his voice rising. Between all of you. $20,000 when I needed $300,000 to live. He gestured towards Sarah. She destroyed her financial future. She gave up everything while you calculated what you could spare from your vacation funds. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. We didn't know it was that serious. You didn't want to know. Jordan's heart monitor began beeping faster, but he didn't care. You wanted to believe I'd always be your safety net, your reliable provider. You took and took and took, and when I finally needed something back, you offered pocket change and called it family loyalty. That's not fair, Lisa protested weakly. Fair? Jordan's laugh was bitter. You spent years poisoning me against the one person who actually loved me. You convinced me she was using me while you were the ones with your hands out every holiday, every crisis, every opportunity. And when I was dying, she saved me. Not you. Her. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of medical equipment. You want to know what's not fair? Jordan continued, his voice deadly quiet. What's not fair is that I wasted years listening to you tear down the woman who just proved she'd sacrifice everything for me. What's not fair is that I almost died believing your lies about her being manipulative when the only people who ever manipulated me are standing in this room right now. His family stood frozen, their faces pale with shock. Get out, Jordan said simply. Jordan, please, his mother began. Get out. Each word was deliberate, final. Sarah and I have a future to discuss. A future that doesn't include people who only show up when someone else is paying the bills. As they filed out in stunned silence, Jordan turned to Sarah, seeing the tears in her eyes and the hope she was trying not to feel. 2 years later, the morning sun filtered through the windows of their downtown office, casting long shadows across the polished conference table where Jordan and Sarah reviewed their quarterly projections. Their business had grown steadily, not the explosive, unsustainable growth of before, but something solid and deliberate. The renewable energy division is exceeding expectations, Sarah said, highlighting numbers on her tablet. Portland wants to discuss expanding into 3 more cities. Are we ready for that kind of growth? Financially, yes, but I'd rather take it slow. Build the infrastructure properly this time. Jordan nodded, admiring her caution. They'd learned that spectacular success could mask fundamental weaknesses. This time, every decision was made together, every risk carefully calculated. His personal phone, silent for nearly 2 years, suddenly buzzed. The caller ID made his stomach tighten. Marcus. Sarah noticed his expression. You don't have to answer. But something in the persistence of the ringing made Jordan reconsider. Marcus had never been one to call unless absolutely necessary. Jordan? Marcus's voice sounded broken, hoarse, desperate. I know I have no right to call you, but Dad's had a massive stroke. He's in the ICU. The words hit Jordan like a physical blow. Despite everything that had happened between them, his father was still his father. How bad? Bad. He might not make it through the night. Mum's, she's falling apart. And the medical bills? Marcus's voice cracked. His insurance has coverage limits. The experimental treatments. The extended care. We're looking at close to $500,000. Jordan felt the familiar tightness in his chest. $500,000. More than his own life-saving surgery had cost. More than his family had been willing to collectively spare when he was dying. We've mortgaged everything, Marcus continued. Sold Mom's jewelry, liquidated the retirement accounts. It's not enough. Not even close. And you're calling me because... A long pause. Because you're his son. Because despite how we treated you, family is family. Because we know you and Sarah have done well, and maybe... Maybe what? Maybe I'd be willing to bankrupt myself for people who watched me nearly die rather than inconvenience themselves. Jordan, please. Did you call Lisa? She seemed very concerned about family loyalty when it suited her purposes. Lisa's tapped out. She gave everything she had. We all did. Jordan could hear the desperation bleeding through Marcus's carefully controlled voice. The same desperation he'd felt 2 years ago when his own family had offered him pocket change and called it love. Don't call me again, Jordan said, ending the call. Sarah had been listening, her expression troubled. Your father? Massive stroke. Needs expensive treatment that insurance won't fully cover. How much? $500,000, maybe more. The number hung between them like an accusation. They had the money. Their careful rebuilding had been successful, and they'd been conservative with their spending. But helping would set them back years, force them to delay expansion plans. What are you thinking? Sarah asked gently. Jordan walked to the window, his jaw clenched. I'm thinking about justice, about karma, about how they threw $20,000 at me like it was generous when I needed $300,000 to live. And I hope they suffer exactly the way they made me suffer. I hope they feel the desperation of watching someone they love slip away while they scramble for money they don't have. His voice was hard, bitter. I hope they understand what it feels like to be abandoned. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching him stare out at the street below. Is that really what you want? She asked softly. Yes. They deserve this. Maybe they do. But Jordan, what does that make you? He turned to face her, seeing the concern in her eyes. It makes me someone who learned not to be a doormat. Or it makes you someone who's become exactly like them. The words hit him harder than he expected. They had this coming, Sarah. You know what they put us through. I do know. I lived it. I watched them try to destroy our marriage. I watched them abandon you when you needed them most. She stood and walked to him. But I also watched you become someone better than they ever were. Don't let their failures turn you into someone you'll hate. They don't deserve compassion. No, they don't, but you deserve to be the kind of person who shows it anyway. Jordan shook his head. I can't. Not after everything. Sarah took his hands, her voice gentle but firm. When I saved your life, it wasn't because you deserved it. You just divorced me, called me manipulative, chosen their poison over my love. By any reasonable measure, I should have let you figure it out yourself. That was different. How? How was it different? Jordan struggled to find an answer. Because you loved me. And you don't love your father. The question hung in the air between them. Jordan thought about his father, flawed, stubborn, sometimes cruel in his favoritism, but also the man who'd taught him to throw a baseball, who'd been proud when Jordan started his business, who'd held him when his grandfather died. I hate what he did to us, Jordan said quietly. I know, but that's not what I asked. Jordan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of conflicting emotions. What if I help him and nothing changes? What if they just go back to being the same selfish people they've always been? Then, at least you'll know you were better than they were. Jordan, this isn't about them. This isn't about whether they deserve help or whether they'll be grateful. This is about who you are when no one's watching, who you are when the choice is hard. $500,000, Sarah. That's our expansion. That's our security. Money we can rebuild. But if you let your father die out of spite, can you rebuild your soul? The words struck deep. Jordan thought about the man he'd become since the surgery. Stronger, more principled, more aware of what really mattered. Would that man let someone die to prove a point? They'll never appreciate it, he said weakly. Maybe not. But you'll know you did the right thing. And Jordan, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from carrying their poison around inside you. Jordan looked at his wife, the woman who'd saved his life when he least deserved it, who'd rebuilt their business and their marriage on principles of unconditional love. She was asking him to be the man she'd always believed he could be. What if I can't forgive them? Then help them anyway. Forgiveness might come later, or it might not. But doing the right thing when it's hard, that's what separates us from them. Jordan stared out the window for a long time, wrestling with emotions he'd carried for 2 years. Finally, he picked up his phone and called Marcus back. It's Jordan. Which hospital? The ICU waiting room smelled like disinfectant and despair. Jordan's mother sat hunched in a plastic chair, looking smaller and frailer than he remembered. Marcus paced near the windows, his usual confidence replaced by raw anxiety. Lisa sat beside their mother, holding her hand. They looked up when Jordan and Sarah entered, shock and desperate hope warring in their expressions. "How is he?" Jordan asked. "Critical but stable," his mother whispered. "The doctors say the next 48 hours will determine everything." Jordan pulled out a folder and placed it on the small table. "We'll cover Dad's medical expenses." The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa started crying immediately. Marcus stopped pacing, staring at the folder in disbelief. "All of it?" his mother asked, her voice breaking. "All of it. But there are conditions." The room tensed. "First, complete financial transparency. We pay the hospital directly. Second, we do this once. If you need more help in the future, you figure it out yourselves." "Of course," Marcus said quickly. "Jordan, we don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. This isn't about reconciliation or forgiveness. This is about doing what's right." His mother looked up with tears streaming down her face. "We don't deserve this. After what we did to you, to Sarah." "No," Jordan agreed. "You don't deserve it. But Sarah convinced me that doing the right thing isn't about what people deserve. It's about who we choose to be." Lisa looked at Sarah through her tears. "You talked him into this, didn't you? Even after everything we did to you." Sarah nodded quietly. "Because someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to choose love over revenge." Marcus's voice was barely audible. "We're sorry. For all of it. For not being there when you needed us. For trying to destroy your marriage. For being selfish and small and—" "Save it," Jordan said, though not unkindly. "Apologies are just words. If you really want to make amends, be better people. Be the family Dad would want you to be if he recovers. Jordan opened the folder and withdrew a cashier's check. This covers the immediate expenses. His mother stared at the check, then looked up at Jordan and Sarah with wonder. Why? After everything we did, why would you help us? Jordan looked at Sarah, drawing strength from her steady presence. Because my wife taught me that love doesn't keep score, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help people who don't deserve it. And because I refuse to let your failures make me into someone I can't live with. Jordan's father had survived the stroke, though he required ongoing care. The family had been humbled by the experience, not just the medical crisis, but Jordan's response to it. There had been tentative outreach, careful conversations, the slow acknowledgement that their relationships needed fundamental rebuilding. The Portland expansion is back on track, Sarah said, reviewing their latest financial reports. We should be able to move forward next quarter. Any regrets about helping them? Jordan asked. Sarah considered the question. None. We did what was right regardless of whether they deserved it. That's all we can control. Jordan's phone buzzed with a text from his father. Therapy going well. Would like to thank you both in person when you're ready. It was progress, Jordan supposed. His father's brush with death had changed him, made him more reflective about his relationships and choices. The family dynamics were slowly shifting, less manipulation, more honesty. Dad wants to see us, Jordan said, showing Sarah the text. Are you ready for that? Jordan thought about the question. Was he ready to sit across from the man who'd helped poison his mind against Sarah? Ready to navigate the complex emotions that still existed between them? I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is showing up anyway. Sarah smiled. When you decide you want to see him, I'll be there. Jordan looked around their office. Rebuilt, thriving, founded on principles of mutual respect and unconditional support. They'd proven that love could survive betrayal, that success could be achieved without compromising your values, that sometimes the hardest thing to do was also the right thing to do. Most importantly, they'd learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing. It was about refusing to let other people's failures define who you became. Thank you, Jordan said suddenly. For what? For saving my life. For rebuilding our business, for talking me into helping them when I wanted to let them suffer. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. For better or worse, remember. Even when worse involves your husband's dysfunctional family. Especially then. Outside their window, the city continued its endless rhythm of ambition and disappointment, success and failure, love and loss. But inside their office, surrounded by the evidence of what they'd built together, Jordan felt something profound, the deep peace that came from knowing he'd chosen love over resentment, principle over revenge, growth over bitterness. It had taken nearly losing everything to understand what really mattered. But now, holding Sarah's hand in the business they'd created as true partners, Jordan finally grasped the most important lesson of all. The measure of a person wasn't in how they treated those who deserved their kindness, but in how they treated those who didn't.